Well, hey, welcome to the X Podcast. We're so glad to have you back. I'm with my good friend, as always, my brother from another mother with the exact same last name, Russell Moore.
Hey.
John Russell Moore.
It's me. We've had a lot of conversations recently.
We have? Yes, we did. We just had one at church on Sunday, a sit-down combo.
We did. Last week was your book launch.
Yeah.
Congratulations again.
Yeah.
Really successful,
Great start.
Launch.
Great start, and then we also recorded an album. I mean, a lot of great things have been happening.
We did. If you want to hear my voice
on the album.
On the album.
There was a microphone right in front of you.
There was.
So there's a very good chance we will hear your voice on it.
It's angelic.
Yes, angelic. Well, it's good to have you. So at the time of us getting together on a regular time to record this, we've had yet another significant national tragedy. Mm-hmm. And so literally we are less than 24 hours from a second real mass shooting that's happened recently.
Third.
Well, yeah, the third one in California, I don't know. As tragic as it is, they don't know that they classify it as a mass shooting. I think 4 people or more have to die. Isn't that awful?
I thought there were.
No, when I read there wasn't. So I think there was only 1 or 2, and there was a couple injured. So, but anyways, the ones that at least have made real national headlines, and we had planned. I had mentioned this to you. Timing was bad because I was out of town for a week, and that when I got back, I wanted to have a conversation about the mass shooting in Buffalo, and we didn't even have a chance to do that. And then literally that was going to be the plan, was today to talk about the mass shooting in Buffalo and just what has come out of that and process that a little bit. Yeah. And then we have all of a sudden another horrific mass shooting in an elementary school that happened yesterday as of the time of us recording this. Yeah. And I think at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon that happened down in Texas by San Antonio. Uvalde. Is that how you say it? I think it's Uvalde.
Uvalde. You know that's the town where Matthew McConaughey's from.
No, I didn't know that.
Yep.
Uvalde?
At Robb Elementary School. Yeah,
Robb Elementary School. That's right. And so just awful. I mean, so tragic. Elementary kids, and I think they had 19 children. I think I saw that were killed. Many others shot. Yeah. Some of them, I think, still in critical condition.
They're still updating. Even last night, they were updating deaths.
Some are still in critical condition. I think when I read some stuff in the news today, it was 19 and 2 adults. Yeah. I think. Is it 2 adults or 1?
What, have they updated it from 1? I think they did update it from 1 to 2.
It might have been 2. I think it is. And just so awful, so tragic. And so I thought maybe we would take an episode here just to process these shootings, these killings that have happened in our country, kind of what has created them, what can we do? I think there's a lot of conversation that, and rightfully so, around how do we stop this? Because, man, when you hear about anybody getting killed in these mass shootings that are just senseless, they don't know the people. It's not like a personal murder. Doesn't make that better. But, it's one thing another thing when people just walk into a foreign place or a place and just start shooting people random. There's just something so tragic about that I think it affects you deeply. And then I think when you have it happen at elementary school, it's not like it's any better, but there's just something about the innocence of an elementary kid. Elementary students from, what was it, 2nd to 4th grade or 1st to 3rd grade or 4th grade, I don't know, 10-year-olds, 7-year-olds, just brutally gunned down, that it just bothers you deeply.
Yeah, brutally. They're having to they're having to bring in parents to identify the victims through shoes, and with the forensics team. It is most people I saw that have been brought in for this investigation, professionals could barely get through the interviews.
I can't imagine how traumatic it would be to be on the scene and to have to be one to go in and deal with the carnage of it. And so it is the biggest mass shooting in a school since Sandy Hook, I think, even more than Parkland. Which is just crazy that you can just go through the years and just add them up. Almost, as I was saying, it almost feels like Columbine just really from that, 1999, I think, just seemed to kick off a wave that we've had since then. Yeah. That is just, I think it's deeply troubling. And I think I think one of the things that we wanted to do, I hope if you're watching this, listening to this, I hope that your first response is just to pray for those families. Like I did that yesterday. We did that this morning. Just praying for those tragically affected by this. I can't imagine what it would be like. Immediately where my mind went, and I don't know what you thought when you first heard. Actually, I think it was friend Zach who texted, and I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
And then text us, and I'm like, "What?" And I went and looked. My first reaction, and again, I think this is something that I feel like maybe it's almost been a gift that God has given me the last few years. My first reaction is I immediately thought of friends that I have that have kids that age. Mine are a little bit older now.
Yeah.
But I immediately just thought of like friends that I have that have kids that are 6 and they're 9, and I couldn't imagine what it would be like for them to find out all of a sudden when you sent your kid off to school a regular day to find out your kid was killed.
Yeah.
Like that made it more real for me, even though I don't know any of those families. But that helped me at least just kind of like really process the severity of this.
Yeah.
What did you think and feel when you first heard about the most recent one?
Well, first, it is fresh, and so it's fresh. I'm still processing, and unfortunately, it's fresh but familiar.
Yeah.
What we're processing is familiar, but this specific case is fresh. And I mean, you mentioned it, but I do just want to say, our first response is our heart and prayers go out to the families, and praying for just unimaginable grief. That town, watching even just the officials, the leaders of that town, just in tears, asking the country to pray for them to process. It's another town in America that will never be the same again.
Yep.
My first response probably should have been, my first response was a wave of sorrow, but really quickly after that, probably for some reason more than any other mass shooting, was just anger. A lot of anger. Yeah. I think I don't know that that's healthy, but that's been the main emotion I've been processing, rolling around over the last 24 hours.
Yeah.
It's anger.
And like you said, a lot of it's really interesting. Columbine was a watershed moment for our country, and I'll never forget when it happened. And I'll never forget what was really interesting. I may have told you this before, but years and years after it happened, my dad bought a new edition of a book about all the details of the Columbine case. And I remember I was out actually in Colorado, one of those really surreal moments, and he had finished reading it, so I was reading it. And so all of this has been really vivid for me. And I remember when Columbine happened, I was like in 7th or 8th grade. And I remember I actually remember talking, some of the survivors came and did something at the youth group I was a part of. And I just remember that whole, it was a shaking moment for me as someone going to school. But anyways, I'm in Colorado years later, freshly out of high school, and been rereading this book. And I'm halfway through it, right at the part where I think it was Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris. Is that the two names?
I think
are walking up to the school. And it's been going through their journals and then processing. And right as we get there, my parents say, "Hey, Russ, we need to stop reading for a moment because we're here." And I look up, and I'm at Columbine.
Oh, wow.
Happened to be the school that my niece was doing a dance recital. And me and my dad snuck out halfway during it. Sorry, Kira. And we went around back.
You didn't watch her.
We didn't watch it that day. And we went around back to where the memorial was and just took it all in. And since then, it's been surreal and tragic and terrifying that watershed moment has become the norm.
Yeah.
And I think at this point, over the last 10 years, it's been infuriating that, in all intents and purposes, we've done nothing about it.
We haven't
We
haven't even really put any kind of solutions in place to address it. I mean, that we know of. I mean, there's things. I mean, I know that it's one of the things that I've actually been grateful for, which I think. First of all, I just think that a problem this complex. When I say complex, I mean it's not that complex to have people just go in and do violent things, but to address it in all angles, it's very complex. I think it's going to take a lot of things. It's not going to be one thing to try to solve this. I think there's conversations happening around guns, gun violence, gun control legislation for it. But one of the things that I've seen that I've been thankful for, and I think from Parkland maybe is when it kind of kicked off, was at the school where my daughter goes, there is police presence there every morning and every afternoon.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're there all day, but they're there morning and afternoon. And there's something about seeing that sheriff's car, seeing that police officer standing out front when you're dropping your kid off, that I know it can't stop everything, but it's a little reassuring to feel like there's some type of security there, even if it's more for a deterrent than anything else. And so I know that there are probably a myriad of solutions that they need a little bit of all of them to go in to try to address this. But it is something that we've got to figure out how to stop for the sake of, I think it's not, I think about not just the tragic loss of life of, for these parents, these families. Same thing in Buffalo, all the families. And again, I don't want to overlook, we intended to talk specifically about that shooting on this podcast.
And the racism.
And the racism and just what, for me, was like, what is perpetuating this kind of hatred and that would continue systemically for generations to somebody would go in and do this. And I just, and then to have this. And so I think we've got to do something.
Yeah.
I don't think it's enough to just say this is tragic.
So what can we do, and is there a way to talk about what we can do without polarizing people?
Well, I think first of all, look, let's just put this one out on the table.
Okay.
I've always been very pro 2A, Second Amendment. I've always been had guns, like guns. Really, just I do competitive shooting. So kind of in that regard, not like, I'm not even a hunter. I don't even really like hunting. I don't like the idea of going out and killing animals, especially ones I wouldn't eat. That just does not fancy me. So I don't even hunt.
Yeah.
But I've always liked them for shooting, for that kind of stuff, recreation. So I've always had them, and I think that they're it's a very, very complex situation with guns in America, in the fact that it's hard to just even stamp and put some kind of legislation that's going to fix a situation when you have potentially upwards of 400 million guns in America already floating around. Like it's you can't be naive about the fact that they exist and what they exist for. And I've always been very pro Second Amendment. I think it's constitutional right. I think that there is, when you look at the history, you don't have to look very far around the world to see what's going on in Russia and Ukraine and say, we like to think we're insulated in America from something like that ever happening, but who knows? Tensions are high with China all of a sudden again. Who knows if someday down the road if it would. So to having civilians being armed, and again, that's not from foreign invaders, but also from domestic, is what it was originally intended for. But I think for me, and that'd be my take on 2A. Even somebody who has been pro that, I'm sitting here in the wake of all of this stuff, and that's my personal opinion. There's some, trust me, I know some that are so far they're like, we need to remove any restriction whatsoever. It's all anti-constitutional. My take is not that way. I get to the point where I think that we need to address some things, and I'm fine with legislation stepping in to address it. I think in a holistic way, but I also feel like that is not going to be just the answer. I think everybody politically want to turn it into, we just need to ban guns. Well, that's not going to solve the problem. I think that when you have that many guns in this country and you have all of what it is, I think you have to address this from a holistic perspective. A couple things, and then I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. A couple things that that runs through my mind about trying to curb or address this kind of thing, which at the end of the day, I want to say something that is not practical but spiritual. At the end of the day, we can put as many practical measures in place, but there is definitely just an evil, a sinful, evil thing that exists in human hearts that would cause people to go do this, especially random. Random, it seems random. The one in Buffalo was not random. That was targeted. That, again, what does that speak? The evil of racism. Hatred in a heart that is not of God. To me, it's this. There is an issue that is bigger than just the guns in this, which is a human issue of evil that persists in the heart, that causes people to do awful things. And and so that's why I think there's also a spiritual thing that we pray into. And I hope the church is there to try to share the hope of Christ and the message of love that would hopefully reach into those. It's like Martin Luther King Jr. always said, darkness does not drive out darkness, only light can. And hate does not drive out hate.
Yeah.
Only love can. And so I think that there's a spiritual aspect of that. But that aside, I wanted to have a practical conversation. One of the things that I just noted is that it seems, we're not all the mass shootings, because you have the one in Vegas that was an adult. You have other ones there. It seems to me, though, you trace back, a lot of these mass shootings in schools tend to be from young people. And I feel like that maybe there's a way for us to address that. Hey, okay, it's great that you're 18 years old and you can, vote, and maybe you can join the military. But also know that physiologically, we're not fully formed at 18 years of age. I wonder, you know what I mean? Like to not have all of your mental faculties fully developed and formed to understand what you're doing and the consequences. It's not an excuse for people who does, but these last two shootings were by 18-year-olds. And so I feel like one thing, how do you address, maybe there's a way to actually to limit who is able to get access to certain firearms and what age. Again, it's not a solve. I'm just trying to throw in there when I see what some of the problems are that are persisting. What are some of the trends that we see, and how can we address them? Because I think I think we got to think holistically. Another thing is the amount of money that we spend in this country or we give away. I don't understand. Add a tax. I don't care. I don't understand why there wouldn't be a police presence at every school in America. To me, like I said, as a parent, it has made me feel better knowing that there's a place. Can they do anything? Most of the time, police are a deterrent more than they are, answering to a situation, or responding, first responder. In other words, their presence. One of the things that we've done as a church is, we've had to have off-duty police officers for traffic. But one of the benefits that we had when we had off-duty police officers for traffic is that it's an immediate deterrent for somebody that would maybe want to come to the church and do something. Because we've seen that as well. South Carolina, again, that wasn't on Sunday, but we've seen a mass shooting in Texas where somebody went into a church. And so having a police officer and just their presence alone can be a deterrent from somebody who would, I'm not going to go there because I'm not getting in. I think you got to figure out, and they've done a good job of that at our school, but I think you have to completely lock down, and you only have one way in to a school building during school hours and out. I think a lot of schools have done that. The school where my daughters go have done that. Doors are locked. They lock at a certain time. There's a sheriff there in the morning. In the afternoon, the doors are locked. You can't get in unless you go buzz. Now, granted, someone can still probably get in. Somebody walks out. They wait. I'm just trying to say, what are some measures that we could put in place immediately to try to address this? I think we have to find the money, and I think we need to deal with this in legislation as well. So those are my initial thoughts. I mean, I think we got to do something. I don't know. I don't have the answer, but I think we do have to do something.
I think, I don't know. I'm pretty heated about this. I'm trying to decide how raw to be. I think it is holistic. So I think on one sense, when you look at shootings, if you cannot factor in the emotional, mental, spiritual layer of this, then I don't know another gracious way to say that that's a level of naivety that you have to factor in the continuing increase of violence, the mental health epidemic we're at, especially coming out of quarantine and isolation and despair and despondency and loneliness and suicidal and homicidal tendencies. You have to factor in how medicated and how anxiety-ridden society is. You have to factor in fatherlessness. When you look at violence and you look at the prison systems, I mean, there's an epidemic of fatherlessness. There is a spiritual, I'm sorry, you cannot be 18 years old and go in and slaughter dozens of kids and not believe in evil. Like there is a rising evil. I mean, not to be all spiritual, but we live in the last days where the Bible says the love of many will wax cold. Like we are, there is spiritual darkness.
There is revival that's desperately needed.
Yeah.
There is a need for men and women to grow into their roles and to have purpose in their lives and not to be idle and not to have so much time to fall into addiction and violence and purposelessness. All of that is there. And if you don't see that, I think it's being naive.
Yeah.
On the other hand, and this is where I just want to be careful because I believe in the Second Amendment too. I am not against a responsible citizen owning guns.
Yep.
And I've been shooting before, and they're fun.
You did a pretty good job.
We went. I had a pretty good split. You told me.
You did.
Having said all that, I do not understand America's obsession with guns. And if we don't, America is the only civilized nation that has more civilian guns than human beings.
Yeah.
And we're the only civilized country in the world that has no other country in the modern world comes anywhere near the amount of mass shootings. And I don't care what side of the aisle you're on politically. If we can't do the math to realize that our obsession with, I think where I get angry is I understand the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
I don't fully resonate with the idea of, well, we got to protect ourselves because of other governments. We don't live in this.
Well, it's for our own government too. Originally, I mean, that's what partially.
Yeah, because the truth is we don't live in the 1700s anymore. So there's some contextual things that have changed, and also back then, part of the whole premise was to arm you in the way that the government would be armed. Well, if we're going to go down that road, we need to arm every person down the subdivision with nukes. And with barrel busting bombs. I mean, yeah, I'll just be honest. It infuriates me that there cannot be any meaningful conversation around common sense regulations. And here's what we may even why does anyone need M16? Like the person who designed that said it was designed for warfare. Like why? What was it when Parkland happened? President Trump and people got really mad at him. But even President Trump was like, he tried to outban bumper stocks.
No, that was from the Las Vegas shooting.
But he did after
that was bump stocks.
Bump stocks.
Yeah.
But then and then actually for a few years, like Texas kind of eased they actually increased their gun restrictions, but then they eased them again. And to me.
I was surprised Texas did any restrictions.
Like, help me, because you are someone a little bit more passionate on 2A than I am. Like, why? Like, I think I told you, and this is some weird personal Russ thing, but I was talking to someone for a minute that lived overseas. Yeah. Relationally, and
okay,
and this person,
I know the story.
Yeah, you know the story.
Yeah.
And anyways, and she helped lead worship at a church in Australia.
And, you were actually going to say where?
I was actually going to say.
Okay.
And she, I'll never forget. We were just talking about like Australia and U.S. And I remember she said, "Hey, like one of the things that she was like, you just need to know right front. I was like, I would never live in the United States." And I was like, "Well, why?" And she's like, "Well, everybody knows like there's a fear because you guys are insane with your guns." And there's gun violence all the time. She goes, explain it to me. She goes, and I even heard that there's a lot of Christians that love guns. And I was like, oh,
you don't know. You have no idea.
Like, oh, sweetheart, you don't understand.
You don't understand.
And I was like, it is primarily
God and guns and country.
And so I'm trying to tread so carefully.
Sure.
Because again, I am not against gun ownership.
Right.
I'm not saying I don't currently own one. I'm not saying I would never own one.
Right.
I'm not against them. If you ask me to go shooting with you tomorrow, I'd go with you tomorrow. Yeah. And you're in competition, and everybody has their own hobbies. Like I am not trying to hit on any of that.
Right.
But I do think, like you can be a part of a culture so long that you don't see when it's weird.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
It's like people that come from certain church cultures, and we try to help them understand, hey, your language is... I just wonder if any of us that have ever been part of God Guns America type parts of America so long, if we've ever just considered the fact that it might be weird that we're so... Is that fair to...
I don't know if people would ever see it that way, but I understand what you're saying. It's like you can be in it. So it's been a part of America as long as America has been in existence.
Like, can I read a couple stats?
Sure.
Okay, because we're coming up on 10 years
Yep.
since Sandy Hook of failed anything gun control, of doing
Nothing.
anything.
Nothing.
Anything.
No.
The U.S.
Well, and the closest we've ever been was Will Manchin and Tooney that tried to do legislation, which would have been a bipartisan legislation, and never passed.
Yeah.
And so we've had. Let's just say this before you read these stats.
Yeah.
We've had full Republican Congresses.
Yeah.
We've had full controlled Democrat Congresses.
Yeah.
And we've had split Congresses. And we still, nothing's been passed.
Yeah.
And nothing meaningful
Right.
has been passed. And we have not
Right.
really curbed the violence, obviously, at
Right.
all. So, I mean, it's like, it's definitely something that has created a
And it's this
political.
Why? Like you said it earlier, but like you're talking about why can an 18-year-old not drink a can of beer, but walk in and legally buy 2 AR-15s?
I
If
agree.
you don't think that's insane, I don't care how much you believe in the Second Amendment. If
should-
you don't think that's insane,
Well, we should lower the age of. Is that what you're trying to say?
yeah, just lower the age of
Is
beer.
that what you're trying to
I mean, you can't. Let's just go for it. You cannot drive a car without studying and passing an exam, but you can buy a deadly weapon without buying an exam. You have to register a car. Okay, I'm talking like the most deadly thing in society. I mean, you can almost buy a pack of gum, and any kind of talk of just hey. Like, because here's the thing, the refrain, the fear, and I mean, the NRA will straight up say this, is this fear of taking away our guns. I just got to be honest.
Yeah,
I know a lot of Republicans. I know a lot of Democrats. I don't know and none of my friends are Democrats want to take away people's guns.
I know.
I don't know anyone. I think
that's
I've never
the
heard
polarization of the extremes
Yeah.
when it comes to these arguments.
I've
I
never
really
heard
do.
any. I've never heard any. And there's a lot of crazy Republican leaders. There's a lot of crazy Democrat leaders. But I've never heard either one on either side express desire to take away people's guns. And the slippery slope argument is crazy because you have restrictions on everything else.
Yeah.
And so to me, like I'm just if I'm these families,
Or here's another one that has been, and I don't understand this one, and to me, I'd never have a problem with this, of requiring background checks for any kind of sale, not just in a store. Because you can go person to person,
100%.
or you can go. And listen, as somebody who owns guns and is pro 2A, that doesn't bother me. I do everything legally.
Right.
If I do everything legally, why do I care? It doesn't bother me. You know what I mean? But what I feel like you get, and I think that there are. Here's the unfortunate truth, and we see this in all political things. There's a lot of people from both sides that are more in the middle on this that would love to be able to say, can we just come to the table and come up with something that's, you know what I mean, that is that is not removing this constitutional right ultimately, but is going to keep us safer, is going to keep guns out of the wrong people's hands. I think there's a lot more people that would. The problem is that you have this massive political lobbying that is going on by organizations. It's the same issue that you have with environmental and fuel, and you got these massive lobbyists. You got the same thing with the NRA. I can't stand the NRA. I'm a pro 2A person. I can't stand the NRA. They have actually done nothing good for the gun industry.
They attack the survivors. They attack the kids from Parkland that literally try to go around the country. And
I don't have a membership with NRA. I wouldn't because I don't believe in them.
I almost feel like it'd be easier I almost feel like it'd be almost easier for pro-life and pro-choice to come up with something bipartisan.
It probably would.
Than it would be
for gun, and so I think like what you're saying though is like a common sense, and I consider, and we could have some similarities, some differences, but I think we both would agree and go, we've got to do something about.
We have to do something
about it, and what's crazy is that the last time there was this major, massive shooting 10 years ago, Sandy Hook, which was what spurred, I believe, the bipartisan bill or whatever they were submitting, the Manchin Tooney one, and nothing happened.
Nothing.
And it didn't pass. Listen, and it didn't pass. And I read up on some of this because it could have passed, but there were Democrats. Okay, again, most people think that this is all just, well, the Democrats just want to take all the guns. There were Democrats that didn't vote on it, that when pressed, said that they thought it would be political suicide. So what do we have? We have it's a bunch of political meandering that's happening, that's going on from, you know,
Who
what I mean?
was that?
Like,
I don't know if you saw this. There was a senator yesterday. I think it was a Democrat. And it went viral. It gave them one of the most emotional, impassioned speeches. And just said, he said, basically what went viral is he just kept saying, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
He said, why? He said, why did any of us go through the hassle to get a job
and
at the
not do
top
anything.
levels of government
And do nothing.
And he said, he humbled himself. I'm getting on my hands and knees and I am begging you for a path forward. He goes, I know we're not going to agree on everything, but we can find common agreement for a path forward. Yeah. It is insane that the number one democratic global power in the free world has more mass shootings than days in a year. 2019 was like 571 mass shootings. And the first thing that happens after a mass shooting if somebody says, we've got to do something about it, you have so many, and usually is on the far right, they're saying, oh, don't you dare politicize it. We're not going to do anything. And states like Texas will buckle down even harder.
Yeah.
Here are the stats. The U.S. is the only nation in the world where civilian guns outnumber people. 120.5 guns per 100 people. 46%.
Wait, what was the last one?
120.5 guns per 100 people.
So I was right then.
Yeah,
Probably
so
for about 400 million. That's what I was estimating how many people. I thought it was about 400 million guns.
46% of the world's civilian guns cache.
Right here in the U.S.
Right here in the U.S. France is.
Let's look at if World War III happens. I guess we're at least going to be armed.
and a nuclear aid don't even matter.
It might
does not even matter. France 19.6 guns per 100 people. Germany exact same stat 19.6 guns per 100 people. UK.
Oh, they don't have any.
Our buddies.
They banned it.
4.9 guns per 100 people.
Yeah.
The U.S. has the highest firearm homicide rate in the developed world. In 2019, the number of U.S. deaths from gun violence was about 4 per 100 people, which is 18 times the average rate in other developed countries. The U.S. was home to 4% of the world's population, but accounted for 44% of global suicides by firearm in 2019. Let's see. Half of the world in developed countries had at least one public mass shooting between 88 and 2019, but no other nation saw more than 8 incidents over 22 years. But the U.S. has had over hundreds, almost 2,000 killed, 561 mass shootings in the U.S. in 2017 alone. I mean,
it's a lot.
And what's crazy, I was watching the kind of this documentary the other day about Switzerland. Which Switzerland is actually almost as passionate about gun ownership as we are.
Yeah,
but they have very few, if any, mass shootings because they actually have common sense restrictions. There are other factors because people sometimes try to talk about the Scandinavian countries, but they're very homogeneous. We do have to at least acknowledge the fact
we're far more diverse.
We're a very diverse melting pot.
Yeah.
Ethnically, religiously, ideologically, that's gonna factor in.
It is.
But I guess here's what I'm saying. If you were to say, well, we have all these other things, there's mental health and there's this and this, yes. But consider this: we are putting a society, because we're also the most medicated by anxiety society in the world. We are putting this society with the highest rates of depression, for the most part, anxiety, angst, suicide, and at the anger, polarization, radicalization, and at the fingertips of that society, you're saying, hey, here's unfettered access to all these weapons, many of them semi-automatic. Like, if we, either side, like it is both and it is holistic, but here's the thing, until the church rises up to help with fatherlessness, until the church rises up and by God's grace brings revival to the land, there is only one practical path forward, and that is to make these things less likely by taking dangerous hands, by not making it okay for the guy got these AR-15s the day after he turned 18.
Yeah, it's the day after he turned 18. He got one of them.
And so fight back on me. Here's what I mean, why would it be crazy to require universal background checks? Why would it be crazy to...
Go ahead. I was just saying, we do require background checks on firearms purchased from licensed FFLs. Where the universal background checks is what I was saying earlier, just to point out, is this idea that you cannot sell a firearm to another individual. Because right now, okay, it's one thing when you want to go buy a firearm from a store. They have a federal firearms license, an FFL. There are people who can have FFL. I mean, they usually work in the industry. You pay for it. It's it's not worth doing unless you're going to transfer firearms. That you have to buy one. They have to keep they have to do a background check. When they do, you have to put all your information in. They run the background check before they're allowed to sell it to you.
Right.
That's helpful. Here's where I would say we obviously have to do more than that. It's helpful. The universal background check is that fact that I can take something I personally own and I can just sell it to you for an exchange of cash. And that's legal. Can't do it across state border.
Yeah.
But I could, if you said, hey, man, I need a gun. I'm like, well, I've got an extra one. I'll sell it to you for $600. You can give me $600 and then I've given you one.
Yeah.
Now, what the universal background check would be, the idea, from what I understand, and I could be wrong on this, I've looked in this, but it's been a while, is that for me to legally sell you one, person to person, I would have to do a background check on you.
Yeah.
I've always said I'm not opposed to that. Same
Right.
thing when you go to gun shows and where people are transferring or buying or selling because it's person to person transfer instead of from a dealer. And so, to me,
What about a mental health examination?
I don't have an issue. Well, here's the thing about the mental health examinations. Most of the mass shootings that happen are not from people that would have classified as mental ill. Now, we look at them afterwards and go, oh, this guy was 18 years old. There was nothing in the history of it.
He was also 18.
Again, I brought
And he
that
bought an
point.
AR-15.
I brought that point that he's 18 years old and he's young. So, it just seems like a lot of the school shootings to me or some of these mass shootings, I'm not saying all of them, just seem to happen from some young people.
Should we not ban assault rifles and weapons?
I don't know.
People even argue over that title, over that name.
They do, because first of all, look, I don't want to be insensitive to the situations going on. So at the same time, I have enough experience with a lot of different firearms, okay, that somebody can go do some massive damage with a shotgun. Someone can go massive damage with, you were talking about assault rifles. You can have a pistol that has you can have an extended magazine, okay, in it. They have 20 rounds in it. You can unload those. I can unload those in 5 seconds. I'm not saying it's easier, it's not easier. I'm just saying that where there's a will, there's a way, and there's a way to do it. I don't know that will solve this.
But most people aren't as well trained as you. And first of all,
I'm not trained. I'm personally.
You were, whether it's self-trained or not, you were trained. But you know it because you're a good shot. But I mean, come on. Why does a normal civilian need semi-automatics? Why does a normal civilian need an AR-15? What? I heard Trevor Noah joke. He said, if you need to dump out 100 rounds per minute to go hunting, he said, you should take up fishing.
Yeah.
Why?
You would first of all, some people use them for hunting, but to me, that's you don't need. I wouldn't. I mean, some people want to, and they use them, but not. There's no difference between that and using a rifle that's a semi-automatic. There's rifles that are semi-automatics that are not AR, which is AR. And
AR stands for Armalite. It doesn't stand for assault rifle.
So just for anybody
there's a lot of contentious.
I know,
NRA enthusiasts are like, it's not assault rifle. It's not assault weapon.
We understand.
There was even an Ohio bill that debated the definitions around what's assault weapon
rifle
and what is.
Well, if you're going to ban assault weapons,
I'm not an expert on guns, obviously. Yeah. My point is, we got to freaking do something because kids keep getting slaughtered, and if we can't do simple math of 2 + 2 = 4, that no other modern developed nation is experiencing this level of mass shootings, and also no other modern level is gun obsessed and gun crazed and has the level of civilian guns, like that's going to happen. And the idea of, I mean, I kind of agree with you, kind of don't, about, well, you know, with schools we need to have, I do believe, police presence, but there's people throwing out crazy ideas like, we just need to arm all the teachers.
Well, I don't think.
Are you kidding me?
Well, listen, I don't think. Here's what I'm saying. I don't think we need to arm all the teachers. I don't think teachers go to school, and I know some people, they're going to school to go, hey, wait a minute. I went to school to teach. I didn't want to go to school so that I could get some kind of license and have to carry a gun strapped to me, because there's a lot. Trust me, my teachers were a bad shot.
When they tried to throw the eraser at me when I was chatting with Johnny, they'd always hit Johnny. Like you do not want them shooting.
My wife won't touch guns.
Yeah.
So I mean, in my own family, trust me, I understand the vastness. My oldest daughter took her shooting. She loved it. I took my youngest daughter to go shooting. It freaked her out. She didn't want to touch a gun. And I did it very safely, but it just freaked her out in the moment. And so there's I don't think that teachers should have to, like, well, hey, one of the things you just know, if you want to be a teacher, you're going to have to also be able to, fire. Like, to me, I don't think you need that. I do think, though, we need some solutions within schools specifically. That doesn't address all mass shootings because we just had one in Buffalo that's in a supermarket, but in the schools. I'm just saying we're going to talk about our children. We're talking about our children right now.
Yeah.
I think we need to take every measure possible, and I think that you need to deal with.
Yeah.
We need to have some sensible. This is where I think I would say we need some sensible conversations at a legal level, at the legislation, of how we can address guns being in the wrong hands, guns being used by violent people to do that. This is somebody who's always been pro 2A. I'm telling you, I am okay with that and for that. I would absolutely be okay with that. I think we also have to address how to protect kids in the school.
Yes.
I
agree.
we need both.
I think we need both, but I think the primary conversation, bringing in the church's role, and not just the church's role, but society in general.
We all need to own this.
We've all got to own emotional, mental, and spiritual.
It's out of control.
But I don't think that that's okay. Looking at the intrinsic and the details of school safety can be a red herring to detract from the gun thing. I think that is. I don't even consider that secondary. I think that's tertiary. And here's why: because number one, like you just alluded to, these mass shootings are way beyond schools. They're in the last 5 years. They've been in malls, Walmarts, shopping centers. They've been in movie theaters. They've been in churches. This is not just so. It does not matter.
Yeah.
Second of almost all of the things that many gun enthusiasts have said before of, well, here's what you would need in school. Guess what? Robb Elementary had those things. These are the things that were in place.
Yeah.
That when Salvador came in that school and shot up 19 kids, guess what was in place?
And 2 adults.
Guess what was in place?
What?
4 officers, including a chief, a detective, and 2 officers within the school district. Partnerships with local law enforcement agencies, security staff that patrols door entrances and parking lots of secondary campuses, case managers and social workers on USISD campuses, licensed counselors, threat assessment teams, social media threat monitoring, a visitor management security system, a canine detection services, motion detectors and alarm systems, perimeter fencing at Robb and other schools, security vestibules and outside buzz-in systems, security cameras, a locked classroom door policy, staff and student training, and a threat reporting system.
And it still didn't matter.
All of those things were in place when about 20 kids were murdered.
That's crazy.
So we have got to have a reckoning.
How did he get in? I don't know the details.
I don't know.
We don't know. That's if you have all that in place and it still can't stop it, that's a problem. That's an issue, obviously. So
I don't know. I hope I've not offended our entire audience. I am for the responsible.
I think we need to have. I think in the same way that you and I can sit down and have a conversation about it. I think everybody. This is to me where this is one of those things that I just think, and I hope, like you said, that Democrat, the lawmaker. Who is like, what are we doing here? I think he was speaking to his compadres of what are we doing? We are elected to help represent and to address, and what are we doing? Nothing has happened.
Yeah.
And so I think there is a huge weight that is going to be on the shoulders of lawmakers, especially after this. And it's sad that it takes this. How many, I think you go back to all the other parents of the previous kids that would say, why did it have to get to this? And I think every parent that's there, and I don't want to hear about another tragedy like this, let alone just imagine. I mean, it's like, I think it's just so easy when it's not in your state and it's not in yours that you can slough it off. And it's just one day it's going to show up on your front door.
Right.
I mean, it's a matter of time based on what we live in. And I just think that we got to figure out how to address this. And the reason why I keep saying holistically is because you've also brought up a lot of other things, which is the mental and emotional health. Like we are seeing, it's not just this, and I don't think it's a shock that a lot of the people who are doing these kind of damaging mass shootings are also in that generation of being dramatically affected by everything that's happened for the last couple of decades. I mean, you think about the mental health and emotional health of this generation, and we see them. It is a mess, and I think we've got to figure out how to address that. I think we do have to address how do we make sure that somebody who wants to do something crazy can't just go get their hands on something.
Yeah.
I take responsibility myself as a gun owner. My wife's always been very serious about this, that I take the responsibility that the guns that are in my house are my responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so they get locked up. Mm-hmm. They stay locked up. Mm-hmm. You know, like it's keep ammo separate from, like, just because she was like, my wife's always been like, you hear stories of friends coming over and playing at someone's house when the parents are gone and they get into the gun, and the next thing you know, accident and somebody's killed.
Yep.
And so she's been very, like I said, my wife, I can't get her to go shooting. I took you shooting?
Yeah.
You go shooting? I can't get my wife to go shooting. She has been that anti-guns, but she knows I love them from, I do competition and shooting, and that's, recreational just from that, but mostly just competition shooting.
Yeah.
And yet I'm somebody who's that, and still I have enough common sense.
Right.
And I'm not sure, I guess I don't want to say it that way, because I know people get so heated over this, and we're not trying to offend anybody, and we would have probably different perspectives on all of this, but even I can look at this and go, we've got to figure out how to get this to stop.
Yep.
This has got to, there's something that we have to do. We can't just keep going. And I do think there is momentum. I will say this is the sad reality. I was reading an article of, again, out of Sandy Hook and some other ones, even from Columbine. There have been some organizations and some movements that have been trying to move toward addressing these things. And I think, this is just reading what they were saying in one of them, I think what we are trying to address, and this could be why it's taking so long, is a societal psyche that has, and talking about, has existed for hundreds of years when it comes to guns, when it comes to whatever, that to turn that culturally, that general group think, that other thing, to come to the place of recognizing this is not good. This is a problem. We need to address it.
Yeah.
I think it just might be bigger than we think. And what's sad, and I think that there is momentum. I think there are a lot of, yes, I do. I don't think there's momentum in the legislation, but I think that there are more people like me that have probably been pretty avid gun enthusiasts my entire life that would stand here today and maybe have had a different perspective 10 years ago that would say, no, I'm for responsible people in America, responsible citizens. I'm okay with that. I'm not okay with continuing to have mass shootings and that. And so that's why I think it is turning it. I think it's just way slower than we ever want. And it's sad that it just keeps taking mass shooting after mass shooting after mass shooting to start to finally turn that culturally. And that's, I think that is the unfortunate reality of what we're trying to address.
Why do you think why do you think the psyche of American gun enthusiasts around any kind of like meaningful, logical things to help advance the conversation is so fragile that you can't even touch it with that? I mean, and NRA, let's give it to them. They've been brilliant in the propagandizing. They have postured themselves as the oldest civil rights group.
Right.
They posture themselves beside the UCLA, ACU, like that. You said something interesting talking about like culturally. Zach Brown, he threw out the idea. We were talking about like when you read through the Old Testament and you read through the idols, and our guns in America, could that be one of our cultural idols?
Sure. I think a couple, just to answer why, and again, none of us really know. I'm just saying, I think when you look at how America was founded, that we've come out of a rebellion and a resistance of standing up to the British,
right?
Of citizens. The reason why we won that war was because of citizens that stood up and fought for the freedom. So it's, in one sense, we have how we were founded.
Yeah, we came out of that.
It's kind of, but I'm saying that's been part of our DNA.
Yeah.
Okay. So I do think there's a sense of it that there's been part of that is our DNA. I think on the other side, when you talk about NRA and some, I think you have a lot of factors. I think you have big business that do massive gun lobbying for financial benefit. I really do think that it's the same way with oil and other things that you talk about. They always talk about the lobbyists that are down there that are paying, like buying votes, that protect self-interest for that. So I think you have that on one side, and then I think you also have just look at what's happened for the last 10 plus years of a polarization in the extremes. And so I think, unfortunately, just like with a lot of things, you have these, the polar extremes are the ones that are speaking up. So whenever there's something like this, there's the ones that come up and they get real loud and go, just trying to take away our guns. It's like, no, but this is what happens. The extremes get really loud whenever this happens, and those in the middle that maybe have some common sense and actually want to reach across the aisle and come up with an actual solution, they end up getting drowned out.
Yeah.
And so I do hope, like you said, for the sake of what that plea from that Democratic, senator or congressman person, whatever, just that we need to do something. We need to just. We need to shut out all of these lobbyists, and we need to get in there and say, can we at least take steps? We haven't done anything. Let's take some steps.
Yeah.
Let's take some steps and then see that, hey, that didn't cause this. Okay, take another step. That didn't cause us to lose everything. Take another step. You know what I mean? But that's what people are afraid of. They're afraid of what happened in World War II. They're afraid of what happened in Austria, where Hitler came in before all of this stuff and then convinced them to give up all their guns. And then next thing you know, what happened in World War II when he takes over Austria. And so these are, trust me, I've been around. I've heard all these arguments. These are the arguments that are brought up from really 2A pro advocates for 2A, say. And I've been around all of them. So I'm very familiar. I've been around them all. I don't land there. I land in, I want us to be responsible for the children.
We need responsible, first of all.
And for...
And second of all, I think there are a lot of cultural, because I've heard these arguments too, I think there's a whole lot of cultural context and nuance of why our situation's extremely different. And I also think at the end of the day, when all is said and done, if you're a follower of Jesus, that kingdom mindset has got to trump your American mindset.
Did you say Donald Trump?
No, it's not it was not even an intended pun.
Doesn't it feel like now you can't even use that word?
I know you
can't. It's like I can't. We need another word for it. But
I think like it or not, or hate it or not, or disagree with it or not, Christians, especially on the very conservative right, gun-supporting Christians are being accused of a decent amount of hypocrisy right now. I had a family member, sent me a message this morning that's not a believer, and I've seen plenty of memes enough to know this reflects a lot of sentiment right now. And it was some sort of cartoon or whatever, but basically it was referring to yesterday, and all the Christian Republicans shooting down any conversation about restrictions. And then he wrote back, and he was connecting it to Roe v. Wade, and he said pro-life my. And my A, pro-life, my A, and it's this whole thing of so it looks really weird that a lot of us are really passionate about protecting the unborn, and then when 10 and 11-year-olds are being slaughtered, say don't touch our guns, do not touch my guns. And of course, this is just getting, might as well go dicey. Somebody's talking about the whole thing argument of we're not taking away our guns, we're trying to make it harder to get it. And then somebody was like, well, and then the whole argument you're using for Roe v. Wade. So there's there's so much.
It is. There's some
and neither side
irony.
In any of these scenarios, it seems willing to come to the table and bipartisan.
But isn't this politics in the world we're in today? Unfortunately, why can't civilized people just come and have a conversation about it? Because I can sit and listen to some arguments that you make and go, well, you got a couple good points there. And you know what I mean? And so I just think that to bring all this back around, we don't have any influence over what happens nationally, what happens with firearms, and what happens with money that we spend on how we address the mental health and protection in our schools. We don't right here at this table, but I know that a lot of people listening or watching this are processing it. And so I think, what we wanted to do was just have a conversation. Is like, okay, we didn't really do much talking. You're like, what? Even before, so we want to talk about the angle. I was like, no, let's just sit down and process because I feel like when you have moments like this, everybody's emotions are a little bit raw. And I think that's okay. And I think I would say to those of you that maybe would listen and watch this that, when it comes to guns and legislation, I know this. I know great people that are passionate on both sides of it, and that's fine. You can have your passions when it comes to some of these topics, but I think at some point we have to look at people across the table, and we have to listen to what other people would say that maybe have a different passion than we have. and somehow find common ground for the sake of when you see mass shootings like this. And what's sad too, because I really wanted to, and maybe we'll have to just do this for another conversation, but I wanted to try to dive deeper a little bit into this conversation of also what happened in Buffalo, and it's both really, really tragic, and I think sadly in not even news cycle, but something like this will overshadow that because it's children, but the racist actions of that 18-year-old, and the ideology that we do know behind what he did. Whereas they have journals and they have things written down, and how it was really racially motivated, where he would drive almost 3 hours, I think it was, to a supermarket that's not even in his community. It's literally, this was a targeting of the African American community in that area for the most part. And then his Nazi,
white supremacy
Nazi ideology. I wanted to have a conversation that I feel like got a little bit overshadowed because of yet another mass shooting. And so maybe we'll come back to this in another one. But the question that I keep having is how, when you think about World War II, and you're talking about 1940s, 1930, 1940s, how does a Nazi white supremacy ideology, I mean, we're talking about people that are like pro-Nazis. How does that, I just don't understand how it's still around.
Yeah.
We're talking, what are we? We're 70, 80 years removed?
Yeah.
How does that, and to me there's something.
I got some theories.
But there's just something with hatred. We're talking about an 18-year-old that is generations now removed from it. But yet still. And so there's something with the media, social media. There's something with radicalization that is still happening in our culture of all types.
Xenophobia, replacement theory. We want to talk about that?
There's a variety of things, but I'm more like, look, we've said it. I want to say it again. It abhors me that there are people that would go to acts of violence. You don't even have to do acts of violence to be racist. But would do that based on that. It bothers every fiber in my being. I mean, I hate it. I hate it. We've said it. I almost feel like, to say it, I know we need to talk about it again, but it feels like a broken record, and I hate that. And so I want to even go further and say, how do we root these ideologies out?
Yeah.
I don't have an answer, but I feel like there's got to be some. I feel like we keep addressing the symptom, and then something else happens, and addressing the symptom, and something else happens. And how do we address? Not even from like I've heard the whole spiritual thing, and it's like it's sin. I understand all of that, but
Pastor
there is
Tim,
something.
don't you know?
Oh, I know.
It's a sin issue, not a skin issue.
We don't need more cliches.
Yeah.
What we need is to get to the heart and the root of how do these kind of ideologies still persist, and how are they growing? Here's my thing, in an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
This is what I don't understand. We're not talking about, I can understand if you wanted to say a 60-year-old or a 70-year-old who grew up maybe in a segregated culture to an extent. I don't even know if you'd have to maybe be older than that, but grew up, you know what I mean? That carried some of that generational hatred in.
Right.
But I'm like, this is an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
This was somebody who was born in the 2000s. How does that Nazi, I mean, he hated Jews.
I'll tell you.
How does that persist all the way? How is it still reaching, and its tentacles still reaching people all over this nation?
Because if you're scared enough, the fruit of fear is anger. And when you're angry enough, you will reach back to any ideology that will make sense of your anger. And so now you got a culture of fear. You got a pandemic of fear.
Yeah,
and you got every media outlet that will use your fear to sell. And I'm not going to try to go for the jugular, but we have analysts that shamelessly propagate replacement theory and make white people afraid to be white, and that they're being taken over. And you have thinly veiled xenophobia that has already been boiling in people's spirit and hearts for years and years and years. And you have the climate of the last few years. And then there really is such a thing as evil.
Yeah.
I
agree.
really do believe in dark spiritual forces.
I think there's demonic things behind what is going on. Just to create that. I just don't understand. And maybe this is again, we all have sin issues.
Yeah.
We all have this. I cannot fathom what can be in the heart of somebody that you would drive 3 hours out of your way with weapons and body armor and all of that, and walk in and people you don't know, and you just start shooting.
Yeah.
There is a deep level
darkness.
of evil. There's a darkness that I understand. There's all these practical things, and I was wanting to be able to
It's
address them and
demonic.
talk about. There is something demonic that has to be behind this.
It's demonic.
And if you're not a person of faith, and I don't know what other kind of answer. Not answer.
Yeah.
I don't know other thing we can point to.
Yeah.
That is that deeply rooted,
Yeah,
that
so-
exists generation after generation, because there is spiritual demonic stuff that exists generation after generation in places, in
Yeah.
groups and stuff.
So
I don't know.
so to the person that would ask, this is
Yeah.
maybe my final thoughts.
Yeah.
In the face of all this gun violence, should we pray for revival? Should we partner to end fatherlessness and anger and mental illness? Or should we put in place common sense restrictions to get dangerous weapons out of the hands of people that can continue to commit atrocities? My answer is yes.
All. Yes.
Yes.
Not or, it's all of
That's-
that. But
yes.
we do.
My answer to is do you do one of those three? Is yes.
Yes, all of them, and all of them. And I think that's we do. And I think as citizens, this is what my hope is, that as citizens, I think we all need to wake up today and realize that we are responsible for our country. Let's not just we voted and this is our legislators, and if they aren't doing anything, we're all responsible for our country. And so, at the end of the day, I just my heart goes out to in this month. There have been several mass shootings, two very specific ones that we have made a lot of the news, and rightfully so. The one in Buffalo is just pure evil and racially motivated. That just there's, and the one with children down in Texas. And I'm bothered by it. I know you're bothered by it. I can get that from you today. You're very passionate
heated.
and you're heated.
I'm heated.
And I appreciate that. I think we all need to be. I think if we're not heated toward evil of all states, then something's wrong. I think it should bother you. It should bother you enough that it's okay to have a conversation at very least about it.
Yeah.
If your first reaction is to shut this off or to shut down conversation or to not process this because you think it's going to be political and they're going to come for your thing or this thing,
right?
Then I just think that I hope that if you've listened, and even if you've gotten a little mad, I hope that at least that you hear
I'm
our
not
heart.
coming for your guns.
No, but I hope that at the end of the day, I hope that you will at least take away from, like I said, you and I have probably fallen at least to some extent, but I think we have agreement and understanding things, but we may come from different perspective when it comes to guns. But I think both of us have enough common sense, and I think both of us have enough empathy for what's going on in the world that we could say we got to do something.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm not such a trust me, I've been around World 2A long enough that say if you believe in any kind of restrictions or legislation at all, you're not 2A. That is the mentality of I've been around it long enough. Trust me, I know that is the mentality. If there is any restrictions whatsoever, if you make it so that you can't have a gun at any age, and the answer usually is everyone needs armed, and if everyone was armed, then none of this would be happening. That again, I'm just telling you, these are the answers or solutions on the really, really far extreme 2A movement that exists. I believe in the Second Amendment. I believe in all the constitutional rights, and I believe that's part of what makes this country what it is. But I also can have enough. I think I'm trying to choose my words right, because I feel like I say certain words, and all of a sudden you're like, you just said that I don't have. No, I have enough sense of human dignity. And life that I think we need to address this. So it's been long overdue. That we need to address this and not address it in a way that goes, okay, everybody turn in all your guns because you're just going to create a civil war at best. That's not the answer. The answer is, how do we put restrictions in place so that we keep guns out of people's hands? I think, how do you create some more responsibility? There has been some, I will say this, how do you create more responsibility on the shoulders of gun owners? So if you own a firearm, and you're a parent. Like, for example, there was the 15-year-old, I don't know if I'm getting this right, Michigan kid that went and took a firearm that he got that was his, but wasn't his. I don't know if he did. I don't know if he shot somebody. I can't remember. Do you remember talking about this? Happened about 2 or 3 months ago. So a couple months ago, again, we're just thinking off the cuff. So I don't have this, but a couple months ago, there was a very unique situation of a kid who on his social media was his mom buying him a gun.
Yes, I remember this.
At 15.
Yep.
And so the parents ended up being incriminated.
They were bragging about it.
They were bragging about it, and there was concern of his mental state or otherwise from the school that addressed it, and then he ended up, I believe, shooting and killing someone or some people. Do you remember that? He actually did.
I remember that.
And the parents were arrested in that because there's underage, and there was on them showing social media of like, hey, it's his birthday, and so it's kind of like. It wasn't explicit, but it was pretty clear to understand. They bought him this firearm.
And let's be honest too. There's way too little done about, and I get it because it's like, how far can you go if someone is just writing dark things in their journal or saying dark things at home or online? But like the truth is, like you mentioned earlier, is it Uvalde? How do you say it again? The town in Texas.
You said it too fast.
Uvalde.
Anyways, I don't know why I forgot.
So just so you know, and we got to get Lydia Mike so she can fact check this. But I was looking this up before. The shooter, Salvador, the 18-year-old, he went to that high school, Uvalde High School.
The high school.
He did go to the high school.
This was the elementary school.
This was the elementary school, but he did go to the high school. And supposedly there were students that did know him that said, "Oh yeah, we always said he was going to be a serial killer one day." Yeah. Which again,
and it's hard though.
People sometimes put those labels unfairly on people.
And I think that's dangerous too, because we have had there have been some situations in our country where people have said, "Hey, this person seems crazy," and we know in the state, you guys did a podcast, so allegations can run rampant.
Absolutely.
And so it's really hard. The point I was trying to make is, I think we also, need to have what is a sense of responsibility for a gun owner. Okay, if you have a gun that's a weapon that, not just tragedy, but and what's sad is a lot of times, I mean, this kid, El Salvador, whatever his name is, I believe he killed his grandmother too. That was one of the
right before he left.
And so, I mean, sometimes you can't help it if you have somebody who basically kills a family member, takes their weapon and goes.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you're not going to be but I think we have to do better than we've been doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like what our thought was in processing this.
Yeah.
And I think the way to bring the country together in this is for there to be a real bipartisan coming together. That is the one thing I think that would send the loudest message. If there is steps that you can take and agree on it.
You know what someone was saying this morning that they think is going to be the thing to finally do it? Remember Emma Tillett?
Yeah.
People finally saw they finally saw the photograph. Someone was saying this morning, they said, "I know it's disturbing." But they had the person that was actually on, that actually worked with President Obama back when everything happened with Sandy Hook. They had him on TV, and he had at first declined, said, "I will not do this interview because I don't think I can make it through it."
Yeah.
And he's about breaking down because he's like, nothing's happened in 10 years. He's like, I remember being there with the victims' families.
Yeah.
And they said, do you think that for the nation to finally be united on this, to finally unify, there needs to be an Emma Tillett moment? Where people see the photographs, almost like really, this was almost the power of Ukraine.
It was also
Ukraine leveraged the power of it's grisly. You don't want to exploit it, but it's like people saw what was happening to the civilians there, and NATO and the world got angry.
Was it? That's not the same. I was listening to a book that actually talked about in the civil rights movement. What was the picture of the boy where the dogs were? Was coming at and when that picture made headlines and made the front page, that caused a spark in the movement. And so maybe there is something visual that is going to. It's sad. It's a sad day.
Yeah.
I think I would encourage you. regardless of how you feel in this conversation. And we just wanted to flesh it out. We wanted to have the conversation, and
It's raw.
it is. And I think I would just encourage you, if you are a follower of Jesus, these are moments, like they've said, from that town, to pray for the families, pray for these families who are just, they're massive grieving. I can't imagine what they're going to be feeling like. I imagine that even me and what I would hold about guns. Here's what I have enough empathy to understand. If I were in the shoes of one of those parents, it'd probably change my perspective real fast.
Yeah. Yep.
Probably. I'm just saying. I can understand the bigger conversation, the importance of guns and government and all that. I understand all that. But man, if it happened to me, I would be probably screaming. There's got to be something, and we keep the guns out of the hands of an 18-year-old kid like this who can just come into a school and do that. So tragic, heartbroken. I encourage you, pray for the families, and love to know your thoughts on this. I mean, this is, again, we're just processing this in a raw way and being honest, and so not trying to offend anybody, and not politically. To me, this isn't a political issue, even though I know it becomes political.
Right.
This is about these kids. It's about these mass shootings. It's about Buffalo. It's about racism. It's about all these things, and we just felt like it was important to have the conversation. And so, thank you for sticking with us, hopefully. If you stuck with us the whole time, and we'd love to know your thoughts, and so you feel free to share them with us, and your reasons or thoughts, and if we get enough response, then we'll address them. I think we could talk about them. I think that's what this podcast is all about. So you can send emails to podcast@thex.church. We're always welcome those, and as well, if you feel like this would be helpful, send it to someone. If you think it'll create a conversation around all these topics, send it to someone, share it, like it, review it. It always helps get the word out. So thanks for sticking around and talking about this. I know it's kind of a deeply passionate thing, and I appreciate your passion in it. I think we need people that are passionate. We need to all be passionate about it for the sake of the kids and stuff. So
let's get better.
Yeah, let's get better. Amen. So thanks for sticking with us. Until next time, we'll see you next week.